It was 2:43 a.m. when I woke up again. The same minute, the same suffocating silence. I don't know why, but for the last few nights, I've opened my eyes at exactly the same time, to that same sound. It's not footsteps, not whispers. It's breathing. Slow, uneven, soft breathing, coming from somewhere inside my room. At first I tried to rationalize it. It's an old house. Maybe it's the wind. Maybe the ancient heater groaning to life. But last night, when I held my own breath to listen, the sound didn't stop. It changed. It started to match mine, like someone was lying right next to me, breathing in sync with me. I remember just staring at the ceiling, my entire body rigid with fear, too scared to even move. The air felt cold and heavy, like a physical weight pressing down on my chest. My fingers, trembling, slowly reached for the lamp switch. When I flicked it on, the light stuttered twice before finally staying steady. The room looked empty, but it didn't feel empty. It felt like something had just slipped out of sight, just beyond the edge of the light. I'd only been in this house for 2 weeks. It was my grandmother's old place, right at the edge of the woods. After a really bad breakup, I needed silence. I thought loneliness would help me heal, that the quiet would bring me peace. But peace is not what I found here. The first few days were fine, almost ideal. I unpacked, cleaned, tried to settle in and make the space my own. But then, things started to feel off. Just little things, small enough to make you question your own sanity. My favorite coffee mug moved from one side of the counter to the other. Doors I was certain I'd close would be found slightly ajar. I'd hear the faint sound of footsteps upstairs when I was still in the living room. I kept telling myself it was just the house settling old pipes, creaking wood, drafts. But then the dreams began. Every night, I'd find myself in the same hallway long, dark, and seemingly endless. At the very far end, there was a single door, and from behind it, I could hear someone whispering my name. Sarah. The voice was so familiar, soft but trembling with a strange urgency. And every time I reached for the doorknob, something icy cold would grab my wrist. That's when I'd wake up, gasping for air, heart pounding in my ears. Always at 2:43 a.m. The next morning, desperate for a distraction, I decided to tackle the attic. It was a time capsule of forgotten things, old boxers, furniture draped in white sheets, dust motes dancing in the single beam of sunlight. In a dark corner, tucked under a broken rocking chair, I found a small wooden box. It was locked, but the old metal clasp snapped with just a little pressure. Inside, there were 3 old cassette tapes. Each one had a label, written in shaky, almost desperate handwriting. Do not play. My grandmother had never mentioned anything about them. She was a quiet woman, but I vividly remembered her one strict rule: stay out of the basement. And a phrase she once said echoed in my mind: some sounds are meant to be heard twice. I should have listened. I found an old tape recorder in the basement, half buried under dusty boxers and forgotten junk. I blew the dust off, plugged it in, and pressed play on the first tape. At first, all I heard was static, a high-pitched hiss that filled the damp air. Then, a man's voice crackled through, trembling and broken. If you're hearing this, he said, his voice strained, it means you've let it out. Then, the recording stopped abruptly. I just stared at the machine, the words hanging in the silence. Let it out. Let what out? I rewound the tape and played it again, but the same fragmented message repeated, cutting off mid-sentence, as if someone had interrupted him. My hand hesitated before I picked up the second tape. The moment I pressed play, the bare light bulb hanging above me flickered violently. A woman's voice whispered softly through the static, a chillingly calm tone. It waits until you're alone, she said. Don't listen when it speaks your name. Then, complete silence. I froze, my blood turning to ice. The basement suddenly felt 10 degrees colder, the air thick and damp. And that's when I heard it again, the breathing. Slow, deep, steady. And it was right behind me. He spun around, fumbling for my phone, its flashlight beam cutting a frantic path across the basement. The light bounced off old furniture, stone walls, cobwebs, nothing. There was nothing there. But the sound didn't stop. It was so close now I could feel the phantom warmth of it on the back of my neck. I screamed and scrambled up the stairs, slamming the heavy basement door shut behind me. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the floor with every light in the house blazing, just staring at that door, waiting. The next day, I started packing. I was done with this place, but as the sun began to set, the atmosphere in the house changed again. The air grew heavier, thicker. Every corner of the house seemed to hum with a low, quiet energy, like it was alive and watching me. As I walked past the hallway mirror, I stopped dead in my tracks. My reflection. It wasn't moving right. Its eyes blinked a split second after mine. And then, for just an instant, I saw it. I saw someone standing behind me in the reflection, a pale, thin figure, its face half hidden in the shadows. I whipped around. There was no one there, but when I looked back at the mirror, my reflection was smiling a wide, unnatural grin. That was it. I grabbed my keys and ran to the front door, my only thought to get out. But it wouldn't open. The lock twisted halfway and then jammed solid. Then, from upstairs, I heard it. The slow, dragging sound of footsteps. They were moving across the floor right above me, one deliberate step after another, growing closer and closer to the top of the stairs. In a blind panic, I ran back towards the basement, hoping, praying there was another way out. My flashlight flickered as I stumbled down the worn wooden stairs. That's when I saw it. The third tape, lying right in the middle of the cold, concrete floor. This one had no label, just black tape peeling away at the corners. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely get it into the player. I pressed play. At first, it was just static, louder this time. Then, a voice began to speak, and it was my voice. "You can't escape it," it whispered. "It lives in the silence between your breaths. It only stops when you sleep." I froze, every muscle tensed. The words weren't coming from the recorder anymore. They were coming from somewhere behind me. I dropped the player. It clattered on the floor, and I turned. In the faint dying beam of my flashlight, I saw it, a tall, pale figure standing in the corner. Its face was almost mine. Tessame, hair, but its mouth was open, stretching wider, and wider, and wider, until I could hear that same uneven breathing spilling out into the room. I screamed and ran for the stairs, pounding on the basement door, but it wouldn't budge. My hands were raw, my chest was tight, my breath shallow. Then, I felt cold fingers brush against my arm end. A voice whispered softly, directly into my ear, "You shouldn't have listened." Then the light went out. When morning came, the house was silent. The police report said everything looked untouched. No sign of a struggle, no footprints but hers. Sarah's car was still in the driveway. Her bag was packed and waiting by the front door. Down in the basement, the old tape recorder was still running, even though it wasn't plugged into the wall. The first two tapes were shattered into pieces on the floor. The third one was missing. They sealed the house after that. No one has lived there since, but sometimes, the neighbors say, if you walk past at just the right time, around 2:43 a.m., you can hear something inside. Not footsteps, not voices, just breathing. A few days later, a small, unmarked box arrived at the local police station. No return address, no name, just a single cassette tape inside. The label was written in a familiar, shaky hand. It read, "Do not play." But you know how these things go. Someone did, and that's when the breathing started all over again. Thanks for listening to this story. If you enjoy these kinds of tales, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more. Stay safe out there, and maybe don't listen to strange tapes you find in the dark.